The Fox and Big Joe weren't just names whispered in Liverpool's darkest corners, they were kings of a brutal empire built on cocaine, violence and betrayal. Behind their friendly accents and the city's lively pubs, these two gang leaders waged a ruthless war that turned Liverpool's streets into a deadly battleground, where trust was scarce and payback was merciless. This is the true story of power, bloodshed, and the high price of control. Liverpool is a city known around the world for its friendly people, iconic waterfront, and lively pubs where locals gather to share stories and laughter. But beneath this warm and welcoming surface lies a darker side that most outsiders never see. Behind the cheerful accents and bustling streets, a dangerous and violent world thrives, fueled by the demand for cocaine. Over the past decade, Liverpool's cocaine trade has grown into a multi-million-pound business, attracting ruthless criminals willing to kill to protect their territory. The city's geography, with its busy docks and easy access to Europe, made it an ideal entry point for drug shipments. At first, the cocaine arrived in small amounts, smuggled in on cargo ships and hidden in containers. These early shipments were controlled by small-time dealers who sold the drugs on street corners and in pubs. But as the demand grew, so did the scale of the trade. Local gangs saw an opportunity to expand their operations, turning their neighborhoods into battlegrounds for control over the lucrative cocaine routes. The friendly pubs that Liverpool is famous for also became meeting points for gang members to make deals and plan their moves. These once safe places slowly turned into centers of tension and fear. Turf wars began as rival groups fought over who would supply the drugs to different areas of the city. Violence escalated quickly. Shootings, stabbings, and intimidation became everyday dangers for residents caught in the crossfire. Families who once enjoyed peaceful nights out now found themselves living in fear of gang violence spilling into their streets. As the cocaine trade grew, so did the amount of money involved. Big money brought bigger risks and even more brutal methods. The gangs weren't just fighting for profit. They were fighting for power and control over Liverpool itself. The city's bright lights masked a ruthless underground world where betrayal and bloodshed were common. This is the story of that hidden world. A story of power, violence, and survival in the shadows of Liverpool's friendly face. As the cocaine trade in Liverpool expanded, two major gangs began to rise above the rest, each carving out their own territory and building powerful empires. These gangs were not simply groups of street thugs. They were organized, ruthless, and driven by ambition. One of the leaders, known only as the Fox, was a man who combined intelligence with cruelty. He was a master strategist, always thinking several steps ahead of his rivals. The Fox started out small, dealing drugs in back alleys and working his way up through careful planning and a willingness to do whatever it took to win. Over time, he built a network that stretched across the city, controlling supply routes and key distribution points. On the other side was Big Joe, a former dock worker who knew Liverpool's docks better than anyone else. Big Joe understood how to smuggle cocaine into the city without attracting attention. He used his connections among the dock workers and shipping companies to move shipments quickly and quietly. Unlike the Fox, Big Joe was more direct and relied on his reputation for toughness and loyalty. His gang operated mainly in the poorer neighborhoods, where many young men saw joining Big Joe's crew as a way out of poverty. Underneath his rough exterior, Big Joe was known for protecting his community, which earned him respect and loyalty from many locals. The rivalry between the Fox and Big Joe grew more intense as each gang tried to control more of the cocaine market. Neither wanted to back down. The Fox preferred calculated moves and betrayals, while Big Joe relied on intimidation and force. Their conflict wasn't just about drugs, it was a battle for dominance over the city itself. Each victory or loss shifted the balance of power, and the gangs became locked in a deadly game of cat and mouse. The violence escalated quickly. Turf was marked by graffiti and fear, and everyday people found themselves caught between two dangerous forces. Liverpool, a city known for its warmth and community spirit, was becoming a place where trust was scarce and violence was never far away. The stakes were high, and both gangs knew only one side could come out on top. The tension between the gangs reached a breaking point on a cold, foggy night at Liverpool's historic docks. The area had long been a hub for smuggling and illegal activity, but what happened that night shocked the entire city. One of Big Joe's most trusted lieutenants, a man responsible for overseeing large shipments of cocaine, was found dead. He had been shot multiple times, his body left near a pile of shipping containers. The discovery wasn't just a brutal murder, it was a message, a clear warning that the war between the gangs had turned deadly and would no longer be hidden in the shadows. This killing sent shockwaves through both gangs. For Big Joe, it was a devastating loss. His lieutenant was not only a friend, but also a key figure in managing the cocaine operations. Without him, the gang's shipments became vulnerable. The Fox's gang, suspected to be behind the murder, saw it as a strategic move to weaken their rival and take control of the docks. The docks themselves were crucial because they were the main entry point for cocaine shipments arriving in the city. Whoever controlled the docks controlled the drug supply and the money that came with it. The murder marked the start of a violent turf war that spilled out onto the streets. Shootings became more frequent, and innocent people were caught in the crossfire. Families living near the docks reported hearing gunfire late at night, and many pubs once filled with laughter became places where fear lingered. The police struggled to keep up with the rising violence, while the gangs became more aggressive in protecting their territory. What made this war even more dangerous was the unpredictability of the attacks. No one knew when or where the next strike would happen. The violence didn't stay confined to the docks. It spread to neighborhoods, schools, and even community centers. The once peaceful areas of Liverpool were transformed into battlegrounds where every corner could hide a threat. This chapter of bloodshed showed just how far the gangs were willing to go. The cocaine trade had become more than just business. It was now a fight for survival, power, and revenge, with the city itself caught in the crossfire. As the war between the Fox and Big Joe raged on, the chaos attracted new players eager to take advantage of the conflict. Smaller gangs, once content with minor deals and local influence, saw an opportunity to expand their power amid the violence. These groups didn't have the resources or reach of the major gangs, but they were fierce and unpredictable. They began striking deals with both sides, shifting alliances quickly depending on who could offer the most money or protection. This shifting landscape made the gang war even more complicated. Old friendships were broken, and new rivalries formed overnight. Loyalty became a rare commodity, as betrayal often meant survival. Members of the Fox's gang were suspicious of each other, wondering if anyone was secretly working with Big Joe's crew. At the same time, Big Joe's gang faced internal conflicts, as some questioned whether they should continue fighting or seek peace. The smaller gangs played a dangerous game, using deception and violence to gain footholds in neighborhoods once controlled by the bigger groups. The violence wasn't just about cocaine anymore. It spread into other crimes like robbery, extortion, and even human trafficking, as gangs looked for new ways to make money. The once clear boundaries between the gangs became blurred, and innocent people were increasingly caught in the middle. Local businesses faced threats and damage if they refused to pay protection money, while families lived in constant fear of retaliation. The city's pubs, once a place to unwind and socialize, became secret meeting spots for planning attacks or negotiating fragile truces. The atmosphere in these pubs grew tense, with patrons often avoiding certain corners or groups. Behind closed doors, deals were made quickly, then broken just as fast when greed or mistrust took hold. This chapter of shifting alliances and growing violence showed how deep the gang problem had become in Liverpool. It was no longer just two gangs fighting. It was a city divided by fear and suspicion, where survival depended on knowing who to trust and when to strike first. The battle for control had become a ruthless game with no clear end in sight. Amid the growing chaos and shifting alliances, a shocking secret began to unravel inside the Fox's gang. Unbeknownst to most, someone close to him was working as a double agent, feeding valuable information to Big Joe's crew. This betrayal cut deeper than any gunshot because it came from within the gang's own walls. The double agents' actions led to devastating raids where shipments of cocaine were intercepted, and trusted members were arrested or attacked. The Fox's once tight network started to unravel, and paranoia spread among his closest allies. The double agent was careful, striking at critical moments to cause maximum damage without revealing their identity. Entire operations were compromised, with plans mysteriously leaked to Big Joe's gang just before they were put into motion. The Fox struggled to figure out who was responsible, but the traitors' cunning made it nearly impossible to catch them. Suspicion fell on almost everyone, and loyalty became fragile as fear of betrayal grew. This secret war within a war intensified the violence on the streets. Big Joe's gang used the inside information to strike at weak points, making their attacks more effective and deadly. Meanwhile, the Fox's gang became increasingly desperate, resorting to harsher punishments for those suspected of disloyalty. Innocent members suffered, and trust between friends shattered. The double agent's betrayal also affected the wider cocaine trade in Liverpool. With shipments stolen or seized more frequently, the flow of drugs was disrupted, causing frustration among dealers and users alike. Profits dropped, and tensions flared over missed payments and failed deliveries. Rival gangs sensed weakness and tried to move in on both the Fox's and Big Joe's territories, further complicating the conflict. No one could have predicted that such treachery was happening in the heart of the Fox's organization. The secret betrayal showed how fragile even the most powerful gangs could be when trust is broken. It was a deadly game of secrets and lies, where one wrong move could mean death. The battle for control of Liverpool's cocaine trade had become a complex web of deception, and no one was safe from the fallout. Liverpool's pubs have always been more than just places to drink. They are the heart of the community, where neighbors meet, stories are shared, and friendships are formed. But as the gang war escalated, these familiar and friendly spots took on a far darker role. Many pubs became hidden battlegrounds, where deals were made in whispers, and threats were exchanged behind closed doors. What once felt safe and welcoming turned into places filled with suspicion and danger. One particular pub, located in a working-class neighborhood near the docks, became infamous for the secret meetings held within its walls. Known for its warm atmosphere and regular customers, this pub saw a steady flow of gang members from both sides. They came not just to drink but to negotiate drug deals, arrange hits, and discuss plans to expand their territory. The pub's regular patrons, many unaware of the underworld activity happening nearby, began to notice changes, the arrival of strangers, hushed conversations, and a growing tension that wasn't there before. The pub was a perfect cover. Its noisy environment masked whispered conversations, while the familiarity of the setting lulled outsiders into a false sense of security. But inside, power shifted with every clink of a glass. Small gestures, a glance, or a coded phrase could decide life or death. Gang members knew the importance of controlling such places. Holding influence over a pub meant controlling a crucial point in the city's drug distribution network. Violence often spilled over from these gatherings. Brawls broke out, and sometimes shots were fired, sending shockwaves through the neighborhood. Locals feared walking past after dark, worried they might become caught up in the ongoing war. Some pubs were even forced to close temporarily after violent incidents. But others stayed open, surviving on a mixture of fear and loyalty. This chapter reveals how the familiar and friendly face of Liverpool's pubs hid a darker reality. These establishments were no longer just places of social life. They had become key players in a dangerous and deadly war for control of the city's cocaine trade. The lines between community and conflict blurred, and the city's beating heart held secrets that few could see. As the violence escalated and the city's streets grew more dangerous, law enforcement realized that ordinary policing wouldn't be enough to stop the gangs controlling Liverpool's cocaine trade. A special task force was formed, made up of the city's best detectives and undercover officers. Their mission was clear: infiltrate the gangs, gather enough evidence, and bring the leaders to justice. This task force operated in secrecy, knowing that a single mistake could cost lives or blow their cover. Undercover officers faced enormous risks. They had to live double lives, gaining the trust of gang members while hiding their true identities. Some spent months embedded within the gangs, attending meetings and witnessing violent acts firsthand. The officers collected information on drug shipments, locations of secret deals, and names of key players. But even with this intelligence, getting solid proof that could stand up in court proved difficult. Gang members were careful, using coded language and moving money through layers of hidden accounts. Meanwhile, the task force faced another major obstacle: corruption within the police ranks. Some officers were suspected of being on the payroll of the gangs, tipping them off about raids or investigations. This betrayal inside the force weakened the operation and put undercover agents in even greater danger. The task force had to operate with caution, limiting who knew what and constantly changing their tactics to avoid leaks. Despite the challenges, the task force managed to carry out several successful raids, seizing large quantities of cocaine and arresting mid-level gang members. These victories disrupted the supply lines and caused temporary setbacks for both the Fox and Big Joe's gangs. However, the leaders remained elusive, always staying one step ahead of the law. The presence of the task force also added pressure to the gangs, increasing paranoia and mistrust. Members feared that anyone could be an informant, and the threat of arrest made alliances fragile. Yet, even with the police closing in, the gangs refused to back down. The battle for control of Liverpool's cocaine trade continued, now with law enforcement fighting a dangerous and complex war behind the scenes. The violence between the Foxes and Big Joe's gangs reached a terrifying climax one night that would later be known as Payback Night. It began with a series of coordinated attacks, each side striking back hard for losses suffered in recent weeks. The streets of Liverpool became a war zone, with gunfire echoing through neighborhoods and sirens blaring in the distance. What started as targeted hits quickly spiraled out of control, dragging innocent bystanders into the chaos. On this night, both gangs planned revenge attacks meant to send a message of strength and fear. The Fox's route targeted a known safe house used by Big Joe's men, planting explosives that caused widespread destruction. In retaliation, Big Joe's gang ambushed a convoy transporting drugs for the Fox, resulting in a violent shootout that left several wounded and one gang member dead. The violence wasn't limited to gang members. Civilians were caught in the crossfire, with some sustaining injuries from stray bullets or being caught near blasts. The city's emergency services were overwhelmed as calls poured in from frightened residents. Schools and businesses closed early, and people barricaded themselves inside their homes. For many, Payback Night shattered any remaining sense of safety. The usually friendly streets of Liverpool felt like a battlefield where survival was uncertain. The fallout from that night lasted for weeks. Both gangs suffered heavy losses: men, money, and influence. The Fox's gang struggled to recover from the destruction of their safe house, while Big Joe's group mourned the loss of a key member. The violence had shaken their foundations and left them vulnerable to new threats from smaller gangs looking to expand. More than anything, Payback Night exposed the devastating cost of the gang war on the city itself. Families lost loved ones, neighborhoods were scarred, and a deep fear settled over the community. The ongoing cycle of revenge made it clear that peace was far from sight. What started as a fight for control over cocaine had turned into a brutal, unending war with no winners, only survivors trying to hold on. After months of violent clashes and undercover investigations, the Fox's reign over Liverpool's cocaine trade began to crumble. His downfall wasn't caused by a powerful rival or a fierce shootout, but by a mistake born from overconfidence. The Fox, always careful and calculated, grew careless as his empire expanded. He underestimated how deeply the police had infiltrated his organization and overestimated the loyalty of those around him. The double agent, who had been leaking information to Big Joe's gang, had secretly switched sides, working with the police, bring the Fox down. Armed with this insider knowledge, the task force planned a carefully timed operation to catch him off guard. On a chilly evening, police raided one of the Fox's main hideouts, seizing drugs, weapons, and cash worth millions. The Fox was arrested in a dramatic sweep, ending years of his control over Liverpool's streets. His arrest sent shockwaves through the criminal world. The Fox's gang, once feared and untouchable, was thrown into chaos. Many members fled or were arrested in the following weeks, and the power vacuum left behind sparked a scramble among other gangs eager to claim his territory. Big Joe's crew seized the opportunity to expand, moving into areas previously controlled by the Fox. However, this victory was bittersweet, as the city was far from peaceful. Despite the Fox's fall, Big Joe faced new challenges. The gang war had left both sides weakened, and smaller gangs began pushing harder for power. Internal distrust also grew within Big Joe's ranks, as some questioned whether continuing the war was worth the cost. The city's streets remained dangerous, and the drug trade continued underground, with new players ready to step in. The fall of the Fox showed how fragile even the most powerful criminal empires could be when betrayal and law enforcement pressure combined. It marked a turning point in Liverpool's drug war, but did not end it. Instead, it opened a new chapter of uncertainty, where old rivalries faded but new threats emerged, keeping the city on edge. The battle for control of cocaine in Liverpool was far from over. With the Fox behind bars and his empire shattered, many hoped that Liverpool's streets would finally find peace. But the reality was far more complicated. The power vacuum left by his downfall did not bring calm. It sparked a new wave of violence, as smaller gangs and ambitious criminals rushed to claim what remained of the cocaine trade. These new players were younger, hungrier, and less tied to the old rules. The once clear lines of control blurred into chaos, with turf wars flaring up in neighborhoods across Merseyside. Liverpool struggled to heal from years of bloodshed and fear. Families who had lost loved ones tried to rebuild their lives, but the scars ran deep. Community centers and schools worked harder than ever to provide safe spaces for young people, hoping to steer them away from the path of crime. Local leaders and police increased their efforts to crack down on drug distribution, but the roots of the problem went beyond enforcement. Poverty, unemployment, and social exclusion created an environment where the drug trade could thrive. Despite the setbacks, the city's spirit remained strong. Residents refused to let gangs define their home. Many joined grassroots groups, dedicated to reclaiming neighborhoods from violence and drug influence. These groups worked alongside law enforcement and social services to offer alternatives to young people vulnerable to gang recruitment. Yet, the shadow of the cocaine trade still loomed large. The gangs that remained adapted, becoming more secretive and harder to track. New technologies and networks allowed dealers to operate with less risk of detection. The cycle of crime and violence continued, hidden beneath Liverpool's friendly accents and bustling pubs. This story of Liverpool's gangs is not just one of brutality and betrayal but also of resilience and hope. The city's battle with drugs and gangs is ongoing, a complex struggle that reflects deeper social challenges. While the era of the Fox and Big Joe may have ended, the fight for the soul of Liverpool goes on, shaped by those who refuse to be defeated and those determined to change their city's future. The friendly face of Liverpool remains, but behind it, the fight for